everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel, Driving Addict. So today we're gonna drive to the Georgetown, Colorado. We're gonna take the Georgetown Railroad. It's about 15 minutes away from central Denver. So we're gonna drive to the railroad and hop on the train, check out the scenery. So we're taking Highway 6 westbound up to Georgetown, about a 50-minute drive from central Denver. On I-70 westbound to Georgetown right now. Very scenic drive up westbound on I-70.
There's a very significant house on the top. It look like alien something here.
Look at the mountain peaks, you can still see the snow up there. We're still going westbound on I-70. Probably another 25 minutes till we reach Georgetown. Alright, so we just made it to the parking lot. Yeah, it was like a 50-minute drive from central Denver. We took I-70 west up to the parking lot for the Georgetown Railroad Loop. We booked our tickets online for $26 each. And this is what it looks like at the parking lot. A lot of cars from out of state. I see plates from Kansas, Florida, Texas. A lot of visitors from out of state. parking lot to take the railroad loop. Yep, see plates from everywhere. Got Texas, California, Texas, Kansas. Looks beautiful up here. And we're still in a pandemic, so we still need a social distance and put our mask on. Okay. Alright, so we're at the ticket counter for the railroad loop. Georgetown Loop, Railroad, Colorado. Elevation 9,000 feet. And we're still in the middle of a pandemic, so mask and social distance is still in effect. So that's the booth where you purchase tickets, but we purchase ours online. Got this Devil's Gate penitentiary thing, pretty cool looking thing. Here's the Georgetown loop that we'll be taking. And it's right next to a river. Pretty nice. Alright, so we're standing in line waiting to hop on the train. Today's Tuesday around 2 p.m. So looks pretty crowded right now. We're standing in line waiting to hop on the train right now. Can't wait to see. Alright, so people are getting off the train right now, and we're waiting to hop on. So the workers are wiping down the train, you know, keep everything nice and clean. Wiping the seats and rails and stuff. We're still in the middle of this COVID thing, so it's a good thing they keep it clean. So he's wiping down everything right now. All right, so we're hopping on the train right now. Got our tickets. Georgetown Loop. Ở ngoài đi ha. Let's sit outside. Uh-huh. We want outside.
Three.
Thank you, sir. Hả?
Sao ngồi đâu con này trắng nắng nè.
Sao nắng hả? Alright, so we just sat down. Still waiting for people to hop on board.
A couple of things to go over. We like to call those the friendly reminders. First off, get this one right out of the way. Effective July 3rd, 2020, at the request of Clear Creek County Health Board, face masks must be worn in all public areas unless 6-foot distance can be maintained. With this in mind, we do ask that everyone please remain in the cars to which you have been assigned. Due to the ever-present potential for forest fires, and to help preserve our railroad equipment, smoking is not permitted at any time. Including those modified for use with Colorado's half-people green plant are likewise prohibited. Now, this next one is for everyone, but especially for youngsters traveling with us today. As tempting as it might be, please do not reach out over the side and grab at plants, leaves, bushes, elves, gnomes, track trolls, tommyknockers, or anything else that passes alongside of us. Should the need arise to dispose of anything in the course of the trip today, waste cans have been provided for convenience. There are 2 in every car, 1 at each end, and they're located beneath the bench seats. All that remains to sit back and enjoy the sunshine, scenery, and history, which we have in abundance here today. My name's Kevin. I'll be your conductor today, your brakeman Stan. We'll be working our way through the coaches both on the up and downhill runs. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. If we don't know the answer, we'll do our best to find someone who does. But once again, welcome aboard.
Ngồi cho là hàng chị nó nói cái giật mình luôn.
Original railway in the winter of 1883 and 84. Upon completion, they had spent $225,000 on this bridge, quite a considerable sum of money at that time. But when it was cut up for scrap in 1939, the bridge sold for less than $600. The new bridge went up in time for the railroad centennial in 1984, and it's made out of high-grade structural steel, making it 5 times stronger than the original bridge, and a little bit more expensive as well, $1.1 million to be exact. Now, we call this a near-exact replica because it does not share 2 things in common with the original bridge. You see, from day one, the original iron bridge had a very bad habit of sagging in the middle and swaying anywhere from 4 to 6 inches off its center line. But rest assured, though, while this looks like the original bridge, it does not move like the original, because if it did, none of your train crew would be here right now. For that kind of a thrill ride, we prefer to either drive on Floyd Hill or head on down to Elitch Gardens. You can always spot the locals on the Floyd Hill joke. The second reason has to do with where we are right now. It is here beneath the high bridge that the loop begins. By starting back behind the bridge, you get a complete ride over the loop by first passing beneath the structure, then going over these very same tracks 75 feet above. Now we're going to bring the train to a stop here in just a moment and begin our non-stop run up the hill to Silver Plume. I'm going to let the scenery do all the talking at this point, and I'll rejoin you at the Silver Plume Yard.
elevation right now is about 11 to 12,000 feet above sea level. About 12,000 feet above sea level. We're in Georgetown, Colorado. Georgetown, Colorado. if you look straight, that's I-70. You can see I-70 from here. Alright, so we're like 5 minutes into this train ride, and so far so good. Love every minute of it. So if you guys like this video, please hit like and subscribe. As the COVID-19 thing calmed down, I will try to do more travel videos. But as of now, yeah, not a lot of traveling videos. So please hit like and subscribe, and please ring the bell. So far we haven't seen any wildlife yet. We're hoping to catch, hoping to see some elks or deer soon, but so far I haven't seen any wildlife.
Preparations are made for the return trip downgrade, including the removal of engine 1934 from the west end of the train, placed on the east end for the downhill run.
Alright, so that's I-70 right over there. That's I-70. So elevation 9,178 feet. Silver plume. All right, so I guess we've reached our destination and just waiting to go back down.
And we arrived at the Silver Plume Yard. While we make our preparations, you might want to keep a sharp eye out off here to the right side of the train with the rocks and bluffs up above the town of Silver Plume. If you think you see a boulder, get up and walk off. This is not your imagination playing tricks on you, nor is it the effects of altitude. What you've just seen is a bighorn sheep. Their natural coloring is a spot-on match for the granite rock that they call home, and unless they get up and move, they're hiding in plain sight. Railroad was originally laid down at an average cost of around $30,000 a mile. A standard gauge railroad would have cost them closer to $90,000 a mile. The smaller cars could also make tighter turns, such as the one we're about to enter. And this allowed the railroads to simply go around obstacles in their path. This allowed them to reduce their reliance on expensive bridges, tunnels, and trestles. Being smaller, these cars were also much lighter than their standard gauge counterparts, which meant for considerable savings in the amount of fuel that was burned by the steam engines as they pulled the heavy passenger and freight trains on the steep climb up from Denver. Now, as we get into this curve, and for the next mile after it, we are going to be on the steepest section of the line. We're now beginning to descend at a rate of 4.13%. What that means is that for every 100 feet we travel, we are losing 4.13 feet in elevation. And that might not sound like much, but by railroad standards, we're dropping like a stone at this point. As we get onto this straightaway, we're going to be passing through a rather substantial field of boulders that will be visible to both sides of the train. Now, these rocks were torn from the mountains all around you by glaciers at the end of the last ice age. And as those glaciers melted, these rocks, some of which are the size of small houses, fell out of the bottom and came to rest on the valley floor. When the railroad reached this boulder field in the summer of 1882, the only way to clear a path for the tracks to be put in was to use hammers and chisels to drill 18-inch deep holes into these rocks, slowly lower a vial of nitroglycerin into the bottom, followed by 2 bags full of gunpowder, and that was used to set off the nitroglycerin. You would then put in the fuse, put a wood plug over the top of the whole thing to contain the explosion, light the fuse and run like, well, you see where I'm going with this. And whose job was it to light that fuse? Well, those are members of the crew known as powder monkeys. These were young boys anywhere from 7 to 14 years of age who were chosen for this task because the other members of the crew considered them to be the only ones fast and agile enough to light the fuses and get out of harm's way before all of that explosive went up. So kids, when you're asked to clean your room, there are worse things you could be doing, including being a powder monkey for the GD&L. Now, just a moment, we're going to be passing through a cut in the hillside. As we do so, I'd like to direct your attention to the stone retaining walls that will rise up to both sides. These walls were built by Cornish and Welsh miners back in 1881 in a method known as dry stacking. This means that there was no mortar used to hold these stones in place. The rocks are simply stacked in such a way that their own weight locks the walls together. For over 130 years now, these walls have been silently standing here as a testament to the skill of these men. As in all of this time since their construction, they have required little, if anything, in the way of maintenance. The metal retaining bolts in the uphill wall were added only 20 years ago to help protect the wall against the weight and vibration produced by Interstate 70 above it.
Đốt xong rồi hả?
All right, guys. So that was the end of it. All right, so now we come to a stop.
And we have now arrived at the station for the Lebanon Silver Mine Tour.
more customers.
For those of you that have the mine tour to your ride today, this is where you'll be disembarking for your tour. Please make sure you have all your personal belongings with you, and please have your wristbands out for the guides to check as you disembark the train. By the use of wagons alone. A severe downturn in the national economy in 1893, which was made all the worse by the repealing of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act that year, caused the price of silver to drop to a point so low that when corrected for inflation, it has yet to recover. When the price of silver at an all-time low, one by one the mines began shutting down here in Clear Creek County. Fortunately for the railroad, they'd already seen the writing on the wall for silver about a decade earlier, when because of overproduction, the price of silver began a slow and steady decline. It was during this time that the railroad began advertising itself as a tourist destination. By the time the bottom of the silver market fell out in 1893, folks just like yourselves were coming from all around the world to ride what was considered one of the scenic and engineering marvels of the Victorian era. Ridership over the loop from Denver continued quite steady into the 20th century, but eventually America's love affair with the automobile would win out. In the summer of 1927, the Colorado Southern discontinued all express and passenger service between Denver and Silver Plume simply due to a lack of interest. They continued running freight trains on an as-needed basis, but by the end of the 1930s, the effects of the Great Depression had dealt a fatal blow to the Colorado Southern. On January 1st, 1939, they petitioned with the Interstate Commerce Commission to abandon the narrow gauge. Receiving permission shortly after their filing, in March of 1939, they began carrying out the railroad and selling it off for scrap. By the spring of 1942, the entire Colorado Southern narrow gauge, including the Georgetown loop, existed only in the memory of those who were fortunate enough to have ridden it. But our story does not end there, as it did for so many of the narrow gauge railroads that once flourished in this state, due to, of all things, the automobile. In 1955, the State Highway Department began reviewing proposals for what would eventually be Interstate 70. The proposed route between Georgetown and Silver Plume would have destroyed much of the railroad trade and the mining history between these two towns. And to preserve all of this for future generations, the State Historical Society was successful in their efforts in getting a section of the interstate re-engineered and placed upon the site of Republican Mountain, where it can be seen today, thus creating the 2,200-acre park that you're visiting today. Starting in 1973, with the help of the U.S. Navy Seabees, materials donated by the Union Pacific Railroad, and the use of locomotives and equipment already in service on the excursion railroad in Central City, the restoration of the loop was underway. Now, the biggest obstacle to the completion of this project was the scrapping of the Devil's Gate Bridge back in 1939. Without that bridge in place, the loop could not be completed. It was then that the Fetcher Foundation of Denver stepped up with a grant in the amount of $1 million, which allowed for a replica of the high bridge to be completed and ready for service just in time for the railroad's 100th anniversary in 1984. Now, if you've been riding the original train, from this point you could look down the valley and see Georgetown from here, all the way out to what is now Georgetown Lake. There wasn't a single tree left standing for a good 30 miles in any given direction. They'd all been cut down for mine support timbers, firewood, and building material. But starting in 1909, under the administration of President Theodore Roosevelt, the U.S. Forestry Service was created, and with its help, the lodgepole and blue spruce have since been given an opportunity to repopulate this entire section of the Rockies. Also off to the left and down below, you would have been looking down onto a picnic ground that the miners had built up here. And it's allowed for a place for them and their families to relax on Sunday afternoons. That was their only day off from mining. And they also built a baseball field up here. Baseball was rapidly gaining popularity as a sport at that time. And the baseball field sat off here to our left, where that large grove of aspens stands today. mining companies would organize their own teams. They would have a little friendly competition up here on Sunday afternoon. Now, while we can't prove it 100%, we have every reason to believe that it was here to the left side of the train that saw the beginnings of the minor leagues here in Colorado. And for the record, that's the only groaner until we reach milepost 5192. Just like the original railroad, ours is narrow gauge. This means that the distance between the rails is 3 feet, as opposed to standard gauge, which in the United States is 4 feet, 8.5 inches between the rails. The 3-foot gauge was preferred in the mountains for a number of reasons in the 1800s, but right up at the top of the list, they were much less expensive to build. According to surviving documents...
Alright, so we made a stop to pick up more customers. And probably another 10 minutes or so till we reach our destination.
To the Everett mine.
Alright, so we pick up, just finished pick up more customers and went on our way down.
Today. Now these are just 2 of the over 400 silver mines that once flourished in this county. By the time silver mining ends in 1893, Upper Clear Creek County by itself had produced $200 million worth of silver. And that was in their dollar value. Today, that comes in somewhere between $2.5 and $5 billion of silver that came out of the mountains around you in a little less than 30 years. This earned Georgetown the nickname Silver Queen of the Rockies, the title she was to carry from 1864 until 1881. At that point, Leadville overtook us in silver production, and from 1881 until the end of the silver mining era, Leadville would carry the title of Silver King. Now we're just about to go right over the top one of the longest operating silver mines in the Griffith Mining District, and that is the Hall Tunnel. Begun in August of 1886 by Mr. George Washington Hall, it was his original intention to drive his tunnel all the way through Leavenworth Mountain, off here to our right, and then connect it to every single mine in the mountain, not only improving drainage and ventilation for those mines, but also allowing them to use his tunnel to bring their gold and silver directly to the railroad. But it didn't work out quite as planned. He only got about 1,000 feet back into that tunnel, and the mine itself is the rock line trench you can see passing beneath the train and moving off here to our right underneath cars in storage. Well, once he hit the 1,000-foot point, he plowed headlong into one of the largest unclaimed silver deposits in the region. And at that point, all thought of a through tunnel project went right out the window. Now, because of the purity of the silver that came out of this mine, it survived the collapse of silver prices back in 1893. And although it changed hands many times over the following decades, it remained a working silver mine off and on until finally shutting down for good in 1942. And from this point on down to the high bridge, if you take a look off to our left side down below, every now and again through the trees you're going to catch glimpses of the loop section of the railroad. The Georgetown Loop was a surveyor's answer to the problem of connecting Georgetown and Silver Plume by railroad. So on paper, it's not a very difficult challenge at all. The towns are 2 miles apart in more or less a straight line up the middle of the valley. The difficulty lies in the fact that in that 2 miles, you need to gain 650 feet in elevation. And this would have produced a railroad grade of 6%, which was way too steep for railroads at that time. And even a modern-day railroad is going to shy away from a grade over 4%. To solve this problem, the surveyors looked to a spot just west of town known as the Devil's Gate. And here, for about 3/4 of a mile, the valley becomes very narrow, and the railroad took full advantage of it. It entered into the narrows on the side of the valley that we are currently on, and continued its climb all the way to the end of the narrows, at which point it made a sweeping turn to the right, crossing the creek for the first of 4 times, and turning the train completely around as it did so, continuous climb on the opposite end of the valley, back in the direction of Georgetown, from which it has just come. And when it reached the Devil's Gate Formation for the second time, it made another sweeping turn to the right, this time crossing over Clear Creek on a massive iron bridge, 300 feet long and 100 feet high. And it was here where the upper and lower tracks crossed that formed the loop from which the railroad takes its name. By looping up the valley this way, they were able to gain much of that necessary change in elevation. But more importantly, by adding the loop into that survey, they increased the overall traveling distance to 4.5 miles, which reduced the railroad grade to 3.5% in most places, which was well within safe operating limits of steam engines at that time. We have now arrived once again at the Devil's Gate Bridge. Now this structure was one of the things that folks rode the trains to experience back in the 1880s. And upon completion in April of 1884, nothing quite like this bridge had ever been attempted.
Alright, so we're almost at our final destination. And, it was like a 30-40 minutes ride. It was a pretty nice ride, you know. I highly recommend it if you're visiting Denver, Colorado. It's an awesome ride. Beautiful day in Colorado. Thanks for watching my video. Guys, have a nice day.